Over the last 200 years, science has changed the way that we think. Rationalisation has taken over superstition. Ghosts, demons, angels and other religious beliefs were considered fairy tales, and people that spoke of such things were going back to the Dark Ages. In recent years, however, science has been forced to consider scientific theories that were previously considered to be outlandish and too strange to be true. These scientific theories talk of invisible worlds, energies, creatures sharing our space and time. Is science just about to rediscover what many ancient cultures seem to already know? Many ancient stories talk of strange creatures and gods and even invisible worlds. These creatures have been feared and worshipped all over the ancient world. Many modern day researchers claim that these gods were technically advanced extraterrestrials. Some researchers disagree. Some researchers believe that the UFO phenomenon is not an extraterrestrial one, but maybe a spiritual one. Aliens are regularly compared to demons due to many similarities, such as strong odours, seemingly magical and telepathical abilities, as well as their supposed ability to possess and paralyse people at will. Many mainstream TV shows like Ancient Aliens on the History Channel asks, are what we think of as demons actually aliens? This video will ask, are what we think of aliens actually demons? Since mankind's earliest writings, creatures with similar abilities are mentioned. In Buddhism, predators are said to desperately wander the earth in constant search of food and water. They are believed to be the souls of the false, corrupted, compulsive, deceitful, jealous, or the greedy. Because of this, their karma leaves them afflicted with an insatiable hunger for a particular substance or object, usually feces or corpses. Predators are invisible to the human eye. Some say they can be seen by humans in certain mental states. They are described as human-like with sunken, mummified skin, narrow limbs, gigantic swollen bellies and long thin necks. Japanese art depicts them as having very small mouths. They are sometimes shown licking up spilt water in temples, and sometimes they are accompanied by demons. Like the jinn in Islam, they dwell in waste and deserted places of the earth, though this varies depending on their past karma. In Thai folklore, they are described as being very tall. Predators are seen as little more than a nuisance to the living, however. Sometimes they can be dangerous, as some are thought to crave blood. Despite this, they are usually pitied on more than feared, and monks at some Buddhist monasteries leave offerings of food, money and flowers for them. In demonology and mythology, the incubus and its female counterpart, the succubus, were thought to be evil spirits that harass and sometimes even rape sleeping men and women. Contact with these demons would usually lead to deterioration of health and sometimes even death. One of the earliest mentions of an incubus comes from Mesopotamia on the Sumerian kings list. Gilgamesh's father is listed as Lilu. It is said that Lilu disturbs and seduces women in their sleep, while Lilitu is a female demon that appears to men in their erotic dreams. A translation of the Sumerian writings by Stephen Herbert Langdon in 1864 reads, "The wicked Atuku, who slaves men alive on the plain. The wicked Alu, who covers men like a garment. The wicked Emitu, the wicked Galu, who bind the body. The wicked Lam, the Lamia, who cause death in the body, the Lilu who wanders in the plain. They have come nigh unto a suffering man on the outside. They have brought about a painful malady in his body. The curse of evil has come to his body. The evil goblin they have placed in his body. An evil bane has come into his body. Evil poison they have placed in his body. An evil malediction has come into his parts. Evil and trouble they have placed in his body. Poison and taint they have placed into his body. They have produced evil. Evil being, evil face, evil mouth, evil tongue, sorcery, venom, slaver, wicked machinations, which are produced in the body of a sick man. Namtar is sometimes called Naturu. He is a hellish minor deity from Mesopotamian mythology. He is a god of death and messenger of An. Namtar was the son of Enlil and Ereshkigal. Before his birth, his father raped the goddess Ninlil. Namtar was thought by some to be a spirit of fate. He is considered to be responsible for diseases and pests. He was once said to have commanded 60 diseases in the form of demons. These diseases could penetrate different parts of the human body. Offerings to him were made to prevent such illnesses. A mare or a nightmare is an evil spirit, sometimes goblin-like in appearance in Germanic folklore. It sits on people's chests while they sleep. They are thought to be responsible for nightmares. Zoroastrianism is considered by many to be responsible for influencing many religions, including Judaism, Christianity and Islam. Like Christianity, Judaism and Islam, Zoroastrianism teaches there is only one God. Zoroastrianism prophet Zoroaster lived in eastern Iran sometime around 1500 BC. By the age of 30 he was preaching, telling his followers there is only one God, and his name was Zara, meaning wise lord. His followers spread throughout Rhisis, Elam, Babylon, Media, Sardis and Armenia. Zoroastrianism talks of one God, heaven, hell and free will. It also talks of the Deva of false gods that in later Zoroastrianism become demonic in nature. The word Devasnaya literally means one who sacrifices to the Devas. The Deva worshipping priest debated frequently with Zoroaster but failed to persuade him to worship the Deva. Zoroaster was murdered because of his opposition to the Devas. In the Gathas, Devas are considered as being capable of discerning truth. A primary collection of sacred texts from the ancient religion Zoroastrianism known as the Avesta claims the final saviour of the world, Sessions, is prophesied to be born to a virgin impregnated by a seed of Zoroaster while bathing in a lake. "30 years before the decisive final battle, a maiden named Eridat Fedri, meaning victorious helper, whose nickname is Bodymaker, will enter the lake in Yasht. This is lake can save her. Sitting in the water, the girl who has not been associated with men will receive victorious knowledge. Her son, when he is born, will not know nourishment from his mother. His body will be sunlike, and the royal glory of the Verena will be with him. Then for the next 57 years he will subsist on vegetables only, then only water, and then the final 10 years on only spiritual food. According to a story preserved in the Vindedad, not long after Ori Mazda had created the world, Angra Mainyu unleashed an innumerable sickness upon it. In response, Ori Madna requested Manfur Spenta Shirasa and Ahriman to find cures for them, promising each that he would reward them with Dharma Afriti. With Ahriman's assistance, Ori Mazda then brought up 10,000 plants to the earth, so providing Fridiana with the means to cure the world of all the illnesses. Fridiana was an Iranian mythological king in Persian mythology. He is also known as Freydin and a hero for Pravina. He is known as an emblem of victory, justice and generosity in Persian literature. Zahak in the text of the Avesta is considered to be the son of Angra Mainyu and the foe of Ori Mazda. Zahak faced a revolution against him when he tried to consolidate his rule by conserving an assembly of leading men of his kingdom into signing a document testifying his righteousness, so that no one could have any excuse for rebellion. One man spoke out against him. He was a blacksmith named Kava. Before the assembly, Kava explained how Zahak's minions had murdered 17 of his 18 sons, so Zahak may feed his snakes' lusts for human brains. The last son had been imprisoned, but he was still alive. Zahak tried to be merciful and freed Kava's son. But when he ended the document attesting to Zahak's justice to Kava to sign the document, Kava tore up the document and left the court and raised the blacksmith's apron as a standard of rebellion. He proclaimed himself in support of Feridun as ruler. Many people followed Kava to the Alborz mountains, where Feridun was living. He was said to be a young man, and he agreed to lead people against Zahak. He had a mace made for him with a head of an ox, and his brothers and followers went forth to fight against Zahak. By the time they got to Zahak, he had already fled and left the capital, and it fell to Feridun with very small resistance. Feridun eventually freed all Zahak's prisoners. Zahak was not quite finished. He knew the capital was strongly against him. He sneaked into his own palace as a spy, and he attempted to assassinate 2 prisoners that were freed. Feridun struck Zahak down with his ox-head mace, but did not kill him. An angel advised Feridun to imprison him in the cave underneath Mount Darmivad, binding him with a lion's pelt tied to his nails and fixed to the walls of the cavern to ensure that he will remain there until the end of the world. Zahak is known to Iranian folklore as Azi Dazaki. The word Azi is thought to be distantly related to the Greek word Omphis, the Latin word Angus, and the Russian and Old Slovakian Yak, all meaning snake. In the final battle with evil, Osiris, Ahriman and Atar will melt the metal in the hills and mountains, and it will beat upon the earth like a river. It is prophesied that Ori Mazda will triumph, and his agent Salshent will resurrect the dead, whose bodies will be restored to eternal perfection, as will the world. The souls will be cleansed and reunited with God, and then time will end, and Asha and immortality will therefore be everlasting. The Pontianak is a demon spoken about in Malay and Indonesian religious traditions. They are believed to be the spirits of women who died while pregnant. After death, these women are said to transform into a ghostly entity. They are said to roam, seeking revenge and attacking people, usually bad men. The Pontianak is sometimes witnessed in a confused and desperate state, searching for an unborn baby. Sometimes they are known to be sinister and capable of changing appearance into a beautiful woman so they can lure their male victims. They are said to seek men voraciously, and when they attack, they have been known to remove the male's genitals with their bare hands. The city of Pontianak in Indonesia is named after this creature, which was claimed to have haunted the first sultan that settled there. Cyrif Adolman Adalkadri was the first sultan of Pontianak Sultanate, and he was supposedly haunted by a vengeful Pontianak. In the city of Pontianak, Indonesia, the Pontianak Sultanate was built on the swamps along the west coast of Kalimantan. In Southwest Asian cultures, swamps are considered places where natural spirits dwell. The local inhabitants advised Cyrif Adolman Al-Qadri to settle and establish somewhere else, but he dismissed the local legend, only to fall victim to a vengeful spirit himself. For this reason, the city was named after the female demon. They are sometimes compared to vampires. John Dee was an English-born, though his family were Welsh, mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, occult philosopher and imperialist. He lived in Mortlake, West London for most of his life. He was an educated man that studied at St John's College in Cambridge. He was eventually accepted into the influential circles of the ruling elite and acted as scientific advisor and confidant to Queen Elizabeth I. He's associated with coining the phrase, the British Empire. During the early part of his life, Dee had very little interest in the supernatural. In later life, however, he became disillusioned with science and began experimenting with the occult. He believed that numbers were the basis of all things and the key to all knowledge. John Dee admitted that he had prayed since his youth for pure and sound wisdom and the understanding of God's truths and the natural and artificial truths, which could be used for the honour of God and to benefit mankind. Not satisfied with the choice of books and knowledge he had access to, and being a deeply religious Christian and Bible believer, he is said to have decided to invoke angels for answers. John Dee is said to have devoted much of his time and effort in the last 30 years or so of his life attempting communications with angels and demons in order to learn the universal language of creation and think about the pre-apocalyptic unity of mankind. John Dee and his partner Edward Kelly, an English lawyer that had both his ears cropped when he was pilloried as a punishment for forgery, a common punishment during the Tudor dynasty. Edward Kelly had spent much of his time studying alchemy, attempting to turn base elements into gold. Disappointed by his results, he turned to black magic. following account was taken from the Lancashire Folklore by John Harland and T.T. Wilkinson, written in 1867. In the reign of Queen Elizabeth I and the year 1560, 3 judicial astrologers met in Preston for the purpose of raising a corpse by incantations. They were Dr. John Dee, Warden of Manchester, Edward Kelly, his assistant and seer, and Paul Waring of Dovecotes near Claydon Brook. Casaubon, in his true and faithful account of what passed for many years between John Dee and some spirits, apparently quoting from Weaver's Funeral Momentum, states that aforesaid Master Edward Kelly, a person well skilled in a judicial astrology, with one Paul Waring, who acted with him in these incantations and all these conjurations, went into the churchyard of St Leonard's in Walton-le-Dale, near Preston, and entered the burial ground exactly at midnight, the moon shining brightly for the purpose of raising the body of the person who had been interred there, and who had, during his lifetime, hidden a quantity of money without disclosing the fact previous to his death. Having had the grave pointed out to them on the preceding day, they opened it, removed the coffin lid, and set to work by various exorcisms, until the body became animated by the spirit entering it again. It is not only satisfied with their wicked desires, it is said, but delivered several strange predictions concerning persons in their neighbourhood, which were literally and exactly fulfilled. Sibley, in his Occult Scientist, relates a similar account of this transaction, and also gives an engraving representing the scene. The British Museum holds several items that were once owned by John Dee, including a specular mirror believed to help see spirits, an elaborately decorated wax seal of God used to support the Showstone, and a gold amulet engraved with a representation of one of Edward Kelly's visions. In the year 1581, occultist John Dee and Edward Kelly claimed they had received communications from angels who provided them with the foundations of a language with which to communicate with what they described as the other side. The angelic language contained its own alphabet, grammar and syntax, which Dee and Kelly wrote down in journals. The new language was called the Enochian, due to John Dee's assertion that the biblical ancestor of Noah, Patriarch Enoch, was the last human to have known the language. Much mystery surrounds John Dee. Hidden beneath a painting of John Dee performing an experiment for Queen Elizabeth I is a dark secret. X-ray imaging of the stately Victorian artwork has revealed that the original painting showed Dee surrounded by human skulls before they painted over it. The painting was not the first image from that period to have been altered. A portrait created by an unknown artist in the 1580s or the early 1590s of Queen Elizabeth I was also manipulated. The portrait showed the monarch holding a bunch of roses. The picture was kept in poor condition, which caused some of the paint to crumble off, exposing the fact that the original image had shown her holding a snake. The reason it was painted over remains unknown. Dr. Tanya Cooper of the Making Art in the Tudor Britain project said, "The recent technical analysis of these remarkable portraits has been critical of our understanding of the Tudor painting. The portrait of Queen Elizabeth with a hidden serpent is a really unusual survival, yet it is difficult to know exactly why the serpent may have been originally included or how common of a motif this might have been. The Queen certainly owned jewellery and costumes including emblems of serpents, which were probably understood as a symbol of wisdom. However, no other portrait of Elizabeth appears to depict her holding a snake." John Dee and Edward Kelly would contact many spirits, but one spirit in particular would continue to dominate the scryings. Appearing time and time again, she called herself Madimi. Dee would eventually name his daughter after her. Dee recorded in his diary that Madimi was a spiritual creature, like a little girl of 7 or 9 years of age. Half angel and half elfin, this spirit taught Dee the Enochian language. John Dee and Edward Kelly enjoyed celebrity status before being expelled from Prague for sorcery. Things took a turn for the worse for John Dee and Edward Kelly's relationship when they were staying in Count Wilhelm Rosenberg's palace in Triben, when Madame requested that Edward Kelly and John Dee shared everything, including wives. To begin, John Dee rejected the request, and the request angered his wife Jane, but in May 1587 they went through with it. After they did this, the angelic messages dried up. Madame and the other angels that had visited John Dee and Edward Kelly for 7 years had now gone. Edward Kelly left and was never known to see John Dee again. Jane Dee gave birth to a child 9 months later that John Dee raised as his own. John Dee, for this part, returned to England with his family and sought an audience with Queen Elizabeth. Shortly afterwards, Dee was given a wardenship of the Christ College, Manchester. Dee returned to Mortlake in 1605 to spend the last days of his life in peace. Dee was left disappointed and frustrated by his search for knowledge, and after the death of Queen Elizabeth, King James I offered Dee no support, and Dee was forced to sell much of his possessions in his final years to support himself and the children that cared for him. He died at the age of 81. Like occultists before him, John Dee, Edward Alexander Crowley, better known as Aleister Crowley, also claimed to have contacted entities from different realities. In his book Magic in Theory in Practice, he writes, "It was a theory of the ancient magicians that any living being is a storehouse of energy, varying in quantity according to the size and health of the animal, and in quality according to its mental and moral character. At the death of the animal, this energy is liberated suddenly. This animal should therefore be killed within the circle or triangle, as the case may be, so that its energy cannot escape. An animal should be selected whose nature accords with that of the ceremony. Thus, by sacrificing a female lamb, one would not obtain any appreciate quality of the fiery energy useful to a magician who is invoking Mars. In such a case, a ram would be more suitable, and this ram should be a virgin. The whole potential of its original total energy should not be diminished in any way. For the high spiritual working, one must accordingly choose that victim which contains the greatest and purest force. The male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable victim. Like John Dee before him, Aleister Crowley worked as a British spy and even claims to have infiltrated the Nazi Party. It is widely speculated that the eventual capture of Nazi politician Rudolf Hess was actually due to the work of Aleister Crowley as a British spy. He is also thought to have written fake Nazi propaganda in order to make the Nazis appear to be ridiculous. Despite being described as the wickedest man on the planet and the beast, a 2002 list of the 100 greatest Britons, which had Sir Winston Churchill as number 1, listed Aleister Crowley as the 73rd greatest Briton of all time. It was associated with secret societies like the Ordo Templi Orientis, the Open Source Order of the Golden Dawn, and the Typhonian Order. Aleister Crowley was highly influential to many musicians. Led Zeppelin, Jay-Z, David Bowie, Ozzy Osbourne and many others have promoted his ideas and beliefs. He also features on the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club album cover. He was also the creator of his own religion. Thelema was a religion that includes and mixes ideas from occultism, yoga, and both Eastern and Western mysticism, especially Hermetic Kabbalah. According to Thelemic legends, in 1918, Aleister Crowley, using magic and ritual, came into contact with an interdimensional entity named Lam. Aleister Crowley's sketch of Lam has a striking resemblance to what many alien abductees and eyewitnesses have described in their experience. Lam was not the only spirit that Aleister Crowley claimed to communicate with. On April 8th, 9th and the 10th, in 1904, he claimed to hear the voice of an entity over his left shoulder. He called this entity Aiwas. He believed Aiwas was a minister of Hor-Par-Krat, meaning Horus the child. Crowley considered this spirit to be the central deity within Thelemic cosmology. In his Book of Law, he describes his experiences. The voice of Aiwas apparently came from over my left shoulder, from the furthest corner of the room. It seemed to echo itself in my physical art in a very strange manner. Hard to describe. I noticed a similar phenomenon when I had been waiting for a message, fraught with great hope or dread. The voice was passionately poured, as if Aiwas were alert about the time limit. The voice was deep, timbre, musical and expressive, its tones solemn, tender, fierce, and aught else as suited the moods of the message. Not bass, perhaps a tenor or a baritone. The English was free of either native or foreign accent, perfectly pure of local or caste mannerisms, thus startling and even uncanny at first hearing. I had a strong impression that the speaker was actually in the corner, where he seemed to be, in a body of fine manner, transparent as a veil gauze, or a cloud of intense smoke. He seemed to be a tall, dark man, in his 30s, well-knit, active and strong, with a face of a savage king, and eyes veiled, lest their gaze should destroy what they saw. The dress was not Arab, it suggested Assyria or Persia, but very vaguely. I took little notice of it. For me, at that time, Aiwas was an angel, such as I had often seen in visions, a being purely astral. In March 1887, when Crowley was 11, his father died of tongue cancer. Crowley described this as a turning point in his life. Aleister Crowley claims himself to be a prophet entrusted with guiding humanity into the Aeon of Horus in the early 20th century. In Aleister Crowley's religion of Thelema, it is believed that the history of humanity can be divided into a series of aeons, each of which was accompanied by its own forms of magical and religious expression. The first of these was the Aeon of Isis, which Thermalites believed occurred during prehistory and which saw mankind worshipping a great goddess symbolised by an ancient deity, Isis. This was followed by the Aeon of Osiris, a period that took place in the classical and medieval centuries when humanity worshipped a singular male god, symbolised by the Egyptian god Osiris, and therefore dominated by patriarchal values. And finally the third Aeon, the Aeon of Horus, which controlled the child god, symbolised by Horus. In this new Aeon, Thermalites believe that humanity will enter a time of self-realisation and self-actualisation. Many people in the modern world dismiss or completely ignore the possibility of God. We consider ourselves far too intellectually and scientifically advanced and aware to believe such nonsense. But are we actually conditioned to think like this? Christianity and Islam are constantly attacked and blamed for many wars, deaths and atrocities worldwide, yet both are peaceful religions that are usually followed by peaceful people. Christianity is considered to be among the largest, most followed religions in the world, yet 1.2 billion of these Christians are Catholic, and the Catholic religion still follows pagan rituals such as Christmas and Easter. Many believe that paganism, the occult and Satanism have infiltrated the world's major religions, including sections of Judaism, Christianity and Islam. Some argue that when Constantine married paganism and Christianity, the door was open for false doctrines to creep into the early Catholic Church, and they were gradually introduced into the system. The Church became divided into the Catholic Church, who accepted Constantine's pagan doctrines, and the true Christian Church, who resisted Constantine's indoctrination. The Catholic Church did not let people's unwillingness to convert to their pagan version of Christianity halt their progress, as many people and cultures were violently forced to convert to Catholicism. The Catholic Church killed, enslaved and destroyed countless people worldwide in their attempts to spread their religion. but on some occasions Catholics were also the victims of violence. General Oliver Cromwell, England's military dictator, political leader and later Lord Protector of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland and Ireland, launched full-scale military attacks on Catholics in Ireland. Francis Stewart explains, faced with the prospect of an Irish alliance with Charles II, Cromwell carried out a series of massacres to subdue the Irish. Then once Cromwell had returned to England, the English Commissionary General Henry Ayrton adopted a deliberate policy of crop burning and starvation, which was responsible for the majority of an estimated 600,000 deaths out of a total Irish population of 1.4 million people. Oliver Cromwell was an independent Puritan after undergoing a religious conversion in the 1630s. The Puritans were a group of English Reformed Protestants in the 16th and 17th centuries who sought to purify the Church of England from all Roman Catholic practices. Martin Luther was a German professor of theology, a composer, priest, monk, and a seminal figure in Protestant Reformation. Luther rejected several teachings and practices of the Roman Catholic Church. He strongly disputed the claim that freedom of God's punishments for sin could be purchased with money. In his 95 Theses of 1517, he proposed an academic discussion of the practice and efficiencies of indulgences. The Catholic Church taught that people required a number of merits to pardon their sin before they could be allowed into heaven after death. Merits could be earned by prayer, fasting, worship, or sometimes things like going on trips to see relics in Rome. If individuals didn't require enough merits, purgatory awaited them after death. Average people didn't have the resources or time to acquire the merits needed to bypass purgatory, but monks did. The Catholic Church taught that monks even earned extra merits, which the Catholic Church decided to sell as indulgences for the forgiveness of sins. The Church sent priests from town to town extracting money from peasants that were worried about the fate of their souls or the souls of their dead loved ones. Professor Luther learnt of this practice when Father John Tetzel arrived in Wittenberg and began alarming Luther's parishioners. This abuse and other disagreements with the Church prompted Luther to write his 95 Theses, meaning 95 statements of condemnation, and post them on the door of the college church, the 16th century version of a bulletin board. His refusal to renounce all of his writings at the demand of Pope Leo in 1520 and the Roman Emperor Charles V at the Diet of Worms 1521 resulted in his excommunication by the Pope and condemnation as an outlaw by the Emperor. His friends feared for his safety and begged him to suppress his book to the German nobility. On the 18th of August 1520 he replied, "We here are of the conviction that the papacy is the seat of the true and real Antichrist. Personally, I declare that I owe the Pope no other obedience than that to the Antichrist. 2 months later, in October 1520, Luther's book on the Babylonian captivity of the Church was published. In this, he spoke of the papacy, the system, not necessarily the individual pope who then reigned, as being nothing else than the kingdom of Babylon and the very Antichrist, for who he is the man of sin, the son of perdition. But he who by his teachings and his ordinances increases the sin and perdition of the souls in the church, while yet he sits in the church as if he were God. All these conditions of many new ages being fulfilled by papal tyranny. 20 years later, and Luther wrote, "O Christ my Lord, look down upon us, and bring upon us the day of judgment, and destroy the brood of Satan in Rome. There sits the man of whom the Apostle Paul wrote, that he will oppose and exalt himself above all that is called God, that man of sin, that son of perdition. He suppresses the law of God and exalts his commandments above the commandments of God." Most mainstream modern-day science dismisses God. Most scientists believe the universe was built from chaos, but could this be true? Some claim that science overlooks scientific evidence when dismissing God. Some people claim evidence of a creator shows when we look at the number 9. Did you know that no matter what number you time the number 9s by, you will always be able to make the answer itself add back up to the number 9? A simple example is 9 times 2 equals 18, 1 plus 8 equals 9, 9 times 3 equals 27, 2 plus 7 equals 9, 9 times 12 equals 108, 1 plus 0 plus 8 equals 9, 9 times 456 equals 4104, 4 plus 1 plus 0 plus 4 equals 9. Is it possible that such patterns could emerge in a universe of chaos? More scientific proof of God is claimed to be the Fibonacci code. The Fibonacci numbers are said to be nature's numbering system. They appear everywhere in nature, from leaf arrangements in plants to the patterns of florets on a flower, the bracts of a pine cone or the scales of a pineapple, snail shells, budding flowers, unborn children, human fingerprints, ear rolls, waves in the sea, and even galaxies in space. Ancient stories from all religions worldwide acknowledge that evil entities have the ability to negatively impact the lives of people in our reality. Horror movies usually portray demons as evil killers that wreak havoc on unsuspecting families. And maybe some demons do dwell in old houses, ruins, graveyards, and various locations around the world. But what if some demons, fallen angels, or other strange creatures are more ambitious than that? What if some of these strange creatures decide to wreak havoc upon the whole world? Many people do not realise that that is exactly what is happening according to many of our ancient textbooks and writings. Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12 states, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against evil powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." What if Satan, his fallen angels and legions of demons are actually manipulating the modern world on a daily basis? Many occult groups believe that angels that had fallen after they had rebelled against God are able to reincarnate into human bodies at will. They usually put themselves in powerful and influential positions. Certain rituals can be performed that allow unclean spirits to physically exist in our reality. It's easy to dismiss these ancient beliefs as nonsense and superstitions, but similar beliefs and traditions were present all over the ancient world. Like all occult knowledge, it comes from ancient times. The ancient pharaohs of Egypt were worshipped as gods. According to the king's list, Allium was both the first king of Eridu and the first king of Summer. He reigned for 28,000 years. In ancient Samaria, they considered kingship to be something that was handed down by the gods, and the original kings were considered gods. Some researchers claim that these same bloodlines still rule over us to this day. This claim is backed up by books like the Book of Enoch, which tells us, "And now the giants who are produced from the spirits and the flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men. From the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits they shall be called. As for the spirits of heaven, in heaven shall be their dwelling, but as for the spirits of the earth, which were upon the earth, on the earth shall be their dwelling. And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on earth, and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offensive, and these spirits shall rise up against children of men, and against women, because they have proceeded from them." The Book of the Cave of Treasures is a book of the New Testament Apocrypha. It states, "And when the prince of the lower order of angels saw what great majesty had been given unto Adam, he was jealous of him. And from that day onwards he did not worship him. And he says to his hosts, Ye shall not worship him, and ye shall not praise him with the angels. It is me that ye shall worship, because I am fire and spirit, and not that I should worship a thing of dust, which have been fashioned of fine dust." And the rebel, meditating these things, would not render obedience to God, and of his own free will he asserted his independence and separated himself from God, but he was swept away out of heaven and fell, and the fall of himself and all of his company from heaven took place on the Satana, because he turned aside, and Shedder, because he was cast out, and Devourer, because he lost the apparel of his glory. And behold, from that day until the present day, he and all of his house have been stripped of their apparel, and they go naked, and they have horrible faces. And when Satana was cast out of heaven, Adam was raised up, that he might ascend to paradise in a chariot of fire, and the angels went before him, singing praises. And the seraphim ascribed holiness unto him, and the cherubim ascribed blessing to him. And mid the cries of joy and praises, Adam went into paradise. In the New Testament, Matthew chapter 24, verse 12, Jesus describes the end of days. Jesus sat upon a Mount of Olives. The disciples came unto him, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be a sign of thy coming and the end of the world? And Jesus answered and says unto them, Take heed that no man shall deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumours of wars. See that ye is not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, because the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be great famines, and pestilence, and earthquakes. All these things are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver upon you to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then many shall be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another, and false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because of this iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure until the end, the same will be saved. The book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 12 states, Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe unto the inhabitants of earth, of the sea, for the devil is come unto you, having great wrath, and when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the male child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times and a half a time, from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened up her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and of the testimony of Jesus Christ. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they all worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto the mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue for 42 months. and he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over the kindreds, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword shall be killed with the sword. Here is the patience of the saints, and the faith of the saints. And behold, another beast coming out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. And he exerciseth great power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He maketh fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had the power to do in sight of the beast. To them that dwell on the earth, that they shall make an image of the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many would not worship the image of the beast should be killed, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bound, to receive the mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell unless that he had the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. The internet is a place of endless conspiracy theories. These conspiracy theories range from interesting, scary, weird, and sometimes far-fetched and quite unbelievable. These theories are usually dismissed as lunacy by the mainstream, but isn't a conspiracy theory just an admission of a lack of knowledge and trust? One conspiracy theory that stands out is the Illuminati. Many people claim that a super powerful secret society called the Illuminati are actually attempting and coming close to taking over the world. This kind of opinion is obviously usually met with huge doubt and sometimes even ridicule, but believers in the Illuminati have some very compelling arguments that is more often than one might think backed up by history books. Adam Weishaupt was born on the 6th of February 1748 in Ingolstadt in the Electorate of Bavaria to Jewish parents. His father was a professor of law at the University of Ingolstadt and died when Adam was just 5 years old. Adam Weishaupt began his formal education at age 7 at a Jesuit school. He later enrolled at the University of Ingolstadt and graduated at the age of 20 with a doctorate of law. He converted to Protestantism when studying, and in 1772 he became a professor of law at Ingolstadt. 4 years later, at the request of Meyer Amschel Rothschild, he founded the Bavarian Illuminati. Meyer Amschel Rothschild was a German Jewish banker and the founder of the Rothschild banking dynasty. He was ranked 7th on Forbes magazine list of the 20 most influential businessmen of all time in 2005. He was born in the Jewish ghetto of Frankfurter Jordangasse. His father had a business in goods trading and currency exchange. He was a personal supplier of coins to the Prince of Hesse. The family home was above a shop, and despite being described as very small, it had 30 people living in it at a time, according to some reports. Despite coming from the ghetto, Meyer Amschel Rothschild and his sons went on to build what many believe become the wealthiest family in human history. The name Rothschild translates to Red Shield, and there are contrasting stories about when the name was took. Some claim that Meyer Amschel Rothschild was born Meyer Amschel Burr and changed his name to Rothschild after the death of his father. But much of the mainstream tells us that the name Rothschild can be traced back to the 15th century. Both stories agree that they took the name from a house they occupied, and some accounts claim that Meyer Amschel Rothschild hung a red shield above the entrance of his shop. Inside the shield, according to some accounts, there was a double-headed eagle. Others claim it was an hexagram, like the Star of David as seen on the Israeli flag, known in Hebrew as the Shield of David. A hexagram is a six-pointed geometric star. It is also one of the most ancient symbols and on the outside of many Masonic temples as a decoration. Albert G. Mackey in the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry explains its Masonic meaning. The interlacing triangles or deltas symbolise the union of the two principles or forces, the active and passive, male and female, pervading the universe. The two triangles, one white and the other black, interlacing typify the mingling of apparent opposites in nature, darkness and light, error and truth, ignorance and wisdom, evil and good throughout human life. The Seal of Solomon is a ring that God given to King Solomon. The ring gave King Solomon power to command demons or the jinn, or even speak with animals. The ring was made from brass and iron and was believed to be directly from heaven. It is usually depicted with either a pentagram or a hexagram engraving on the face of it. In Islamic traditions, a hadith claims a beast will emerge from the earth. With it shall be the ring of Solomon and the staff of Moses. It will brighten the face of the believer and stamp the nose of the disbeliever with the ring. An hexagram is sometimes used in Catholic churches. It is sometimes called the Star of Creation. It is also used in Buddhism, Hindu and the occult. In the occult, the six-pointed star is commonly used as a talisman. A talisman is an object which contains certain magical properties. It was sometimes believed to provide good luck to the holder and sometimes offer protection from evil or harm. By the early years of the 19th century, Meyer Amschel Rothschild had consolidated his position as principal international banker to Prince Wilhelm of Hesse. He began to issue his own international loans and borrowing capital from the Landgrave. Details on the life of Meyer Amschel Rothschild are sketchy, but what is clear is he had started something that was going to make him and his family very rich for a very long time. Researcher Paul Johnson writes, "The Rothschilds are elusive. There is no book about them that is both revealing and accurate. Libraries of nonsense have been written about them. A woman who planned to write a book entitled Lies About the Rothschild abandoned it, saying it was relatively easy to spot the lies, but it proved almost impossible to find out the truth." He writes that unlike the court of Jews of earlier centuries, who had financed and managed European noble houses but often lost their wealth through violence or expropriation, the new kind of international bank created by the Rothschild was impervious to local attacks. Their assets were held in financial instruments circulating through the world as stocks, bonds and debts. According to some reports, Meyer Amschel Rothschild made a will days before he died. This will set out rules that future Rothschilds must follow to allow the family to keep their wealth. All key positions of the House of Rothschilds were to be held by members of the family and not hired hands. Only male members are allowed to participate in business. The oldest son of the oldest son was the head of the family unless the majority of the family agreed otherwise. Nathan was the third oldest son, but was thought to be particularly brilliant and appointed the head of the House of Rothschild in 1812 upon the death of Meyer Amschel Rothschild. The family was to intermarry with their own first and second cousins, allowing them to preserve their vast fortune. Biographer Frederick Morton in The Rothschilds tells us that Meyer Amschel Rothschild and his 5 sons were wizards of finance and fiendish calculators who were motivated by a demonic drive to succeed in their secret undertakings. In recent years, the internet has become flooded with information regarding the Illuminati, the Rothschild family, and there is undoubtedly a lot more information that is easily accessible today than there was 15 or 20 years ago. Many conspiracy theories point out that much of the information is false, put there by people that actually indirectly work for the Illuminati or the Rothschilds. Like World War II, there are so many lies about the Illuminati, it becomes a challenge telling what is truth and what is not. The official story of the Illuminati is the society's goals were to oppose superstition, obscurantism, religious influence over public life, and abuses of state power. The order of the day, according to their statutes, were to put an end to the machinations of the purveyors of injustice, to control them without dominating them. The Illuminati, along with Freemasonry and other secret societies, were outlawed through the edict by Bavarian ruler Charles Theodore with the encouragement of the Roman Catholic Church. In the several years following, the group were vilified by conservative and religious critics who claimed that they continued underground and were responsible for the French Revolution. Most people believe that this was the beginning of the end of the Illuminati. Some, however, believe that the Illuminati may not only have survived attacks from the powerful and influential Catholic Church, but are in fact still operating today, and more powerful than ever, controlling nearly everything we read and watch, as well as our politicians and the Catholic Church. It's a theory that sounds far-fetched to some, but we should consider the fact that a very tiny proportion of people own a huge proportion of the world's land and wealth. These so-called conspiracy theories claim that the Illuminati are occultists withholding valuable information from people. Some claim that the Illuminati have infiltrated other sections of society, as well as secret societies like the Freemasons, the governments, banks, corporations, media, and religions. In his 1993 book, Conspirators' Hierarchy, The Story of the Committee of 300, Dr. John Coleman listed what he claims are the 21 goals of the Illuminati. One, to establish a one-world government / New World Order with a unified church and monetary system under their direction. 2, to bring about the utter destruction of all national identity and national pride. 3, to engineer and bring about the destruction of religion, and more especially the Christian religion, with one exception, their own creation. 4, to establish the ability to control of each and every person through the means of mind control. 5, to bring about the end of all industrialisation, to end production of nuclear generated electric in what they call a post-zero growth society. 6, to encourage and eventually legalise the use of drugs and make pornography an art form. 7, to bring about depopulation of large cities. 8, to suppress all scientific development except for those that is beneficial for the Illuminati. 9. To cause limited wars in advanced countries and starvation and diseases in third world countries. Dr. John Coleman claims that the Illuminati wants to rid the planet of 3 billion people by the year 2050. To weaken the moral fibre of the nation and to demoralise the working class. 11. To keep people everywhere from deciding their own destinies by means of one created crisis after another and then managing such a crisis. This will confuse and demoralise the population. Apathy on a massive scale will result. To introduce new cults and continue the boost of those already functioning. To continue the built-up cult of Christian fundamentalism, begun by the British East Indians Company's servant Derby, which will be misused to strengthen the Zionist state. By identifying with the Jews through the myth of God's chosen people and by donating very substantial amounts of money to what they mistakenly believe is a religious cause in furtherance to Christianity. To export religious liberation ideas around the world so to undermine all existing religions, especially Christianity. To cause a total collapse of the world's economies. To take control of all foreign and domestic policies in the USA. To give the fullest support to the supranational institutions such as the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the Bank of International Settlements, the World Court, and, as far as possible, make local institutions less effective by gradually phasing them out or bringing them under the mantle of the UN. 19. To penetrate and subvert all governments and work within them to destroy sovereign integrity of all nations represented by them. 20. To organise a worldwide terrorist apparatus. 21. To take control of education in America with the intent and purpose of utterly and completely destroying it. The Illuminati are said to hide in plain sight and use symbolism of a message of showing their occultist beliefs on a subliminal level, as well as showing each other that they are indeed members of the Illuminati or other secret societies. The most obvious and noticed symbol of the Illuminati is the Eye of Providence. It is sometimes called the All-Seeing Eye. It is seen on the American $1 bill. Sometimes the eye is located above an unfinished pyramid. This symbol has been connected with secret societies like the Illuminati and Freemasons for hundreds of years. The All-Seeing Eye can be seen on the French Declaration of Human Rights. It is also sometimes seen in corporate logos, tombstones, famous architecture, television, music videos, computer games, and many other places around the modern world. Eye of Horus comes from ancient Egypt. The eye is personified with the goddess Wadjit. Wadjit was one of the earliest Egyptian deities. The Eye of Horus is similar to the Eye of Ra, which belongs to a different god, but represents the same concepts. The name Wadjit translates to the green one and is worn on a uraeus. It is a symbol of protection, royal power and good health. Some theorise it is also a sign of something much darker. The Hadith talks of the one-eyed liar and tells us of the 30 dajjals or deceivers that will appear before the final one. The last hour will not come until the 30 dajjal or deceivers will appear, and the final one will be the one-eyed false messiah. There is no prophet that has not warned the community of that one-eyed liar. Behold, he is one-eyed, and your Lord is not one-eyed. The Dajjal is blind in one eye, and on his forehead is the letters KFR, meaning Kafar, between the eyes of the Dajjal, which every believer will be able to read. Kafar translates to non-believer. Wadjit is depicted as a serpent. Serpent and serpent symbolism is one of the oldest and most widespread mythological symbols in the world. Ouroboros is an ancient symbol of a serpent eating its own tail that represents the perpetual cyclic renewal of life, the eternal return, the cycle of life and death and rebirth leading to immortality. The Hopi people of North America performed the annual snake dance to celebrate the union of snake youth, a sky spirit, and snake girl, an underworld spirit, to renew the fertility of nature. At the end of the celebration, live snakes were handed out and released into fields in hope of good crops. The snake dance is a prayer to the spirits of the clouds, the thunder and lightning, that the rain may fall on their crops. The vision serpent is a creature from pre-Columbian Mayan mythology and one of the most important of all the Mayan serpents. During Mayan bloodletting rituals, participants would experience visions in which they communicated with the ancestors or the gods. These visions took form of a giant serpent, which served as a gateway into the spirit realm. The Dahomey was an African kingdom that existed from about 1600 until 1894, when the last king Benazim was defeated by the French and the kingdom became part of the French colonial empire. The Dahomey people were believed to be serpent worshippers. The Temple of Serpents is said to be home to 50 snakes. and Dahomey traditions demand that every python is treated with respect. Killing a python is punishable by death, even if it was an accident. The rainbow god of Ashanti was also conceived to have the form of a snake. Like Mayan beliefs, in many parts of Africa, the serpent is looked upon as incarnations of deceased relatives. In some cultures, snakes symbolise the umbilical cord, joining all humans to Mother Earth. Serpents are also used as guardians of temples and other sacred places. At Angkor in Cambodia, stone sculptures show multi-headed nagas as guardians of the temples. Four weeks after Gautama Buddha began meditating under the Bodhi tree, the heavens darkened for 7 days, and a prodigious rain descended. The mighty king of serpents, Mukulinda, came from beneath the earth and protected with all of his hood. The one source of all protection. When the great storm had cleared, the serpent king assumed his human form and bowed before Buddha and returned in joy to his palace. Many Chinese cultures and societies worship the dragon. Although these are not exactly serpents, in many cultures a dragon has very similar symbolic meaning to the serpent. For example, the Greek god Lardon and the Norse god Nidhogg are sometimes described as serpents and sometimes dragon. In some places in China, the Indian serpent was equated to the Chinese dragon. The serpent Mayan god best known to us as the feathered serpent is sometimes depicted with wings, as is the Aztec and Toltec equivalents. According to some sources, Alpheum, or sometimes known as Alpheonus, which means serpents, ruled with Uvinon before the two were cast down by Cronus and Rhea. Serpents and reptilians feature heavily in Greek and Roman mythology. Some religions have a much more cautious and dark view on the serpent and serpent worship. Serpents are connected with vengefulness and vindictiveness, as well as manipulation. The Old Testament talks of the serpent that deceived Adam and Eve. The Book of Revelation talks of the ancient serpent and the dragon that will deceive the world. Biblically, the serpent is most identified with Satan or Lilith. The Epic of Gilgamesh is an epic poem from ancient Mesopotamia. It is one of the oldest surviving pieces of literature in the world, and it dates back to the 3rd dynasty of Ur, or the 21st century before Christ. In the poem, Urs-Narshista, who features in a story that is very similar to Noah's Ark, is tasked by Enki to abandon all worldly possessions and create a giant ship to be called the Preserver of Life, to ensure that mankind survived the coming flood. He told Gilgamesh there is a plant that looks like a box thorn. It has prickles like a dog nose, and it will prick the one that plucks it. But if you can possess this plant, you will be again as you were in your youth. Gilgamesh retrieves the plant, achieving immortality. Unfortunately for Gilgamesh, When he stops to bathe, the plant is stolen by a serpent who sheds its skin as it departs. Gilgamesh weeps because he has now lost the chance of immortality. Serpent symbolism is still used regularly in the modern world. It's used on poisons, medicines, emergency services, coats of arms, and many corporate logos. Genesis chapter 2 verse 9 tells us the Lord God made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the middle of the garden were the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the Lord God said, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out of his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So God banished him from the garden to work the ground from which he had been taken. After he drove the man out, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. In the Kabbalah, the tree of life is represented as a diagram of 10 points. Each point represents a Sifrit. In Celtic mythology, the tree of life symbolises wisdom, strength, rebirth and long life. It also unites the upper world and the lower world. It was believed that trees connections to gods and possibly ancestors as well. In the Quran, Adam eats from the tree of immortality after Satan, disguised as a serpent, repeatedly told Adam to eat from the tree, and eventually both Adam and Eve did so, disobeying Allah. In Buddhist tradition, when Buddha attained enlightenment, he was sat under a type of sacred fig tree called the Ficus Vigilisa. The fig tree is also the third tree mentioned in the book of Genesis, after the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve used fig tree leaves to cover themselves after eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In Mark, verse 11, chapter 12, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went out to find if it had any fruit. When he reached out, leaves because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard him say it. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of money changers and benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he says, "It is not written, 'My house will be a house of prayer for all nations,' but you have made it into a den of robbers." The chief priests and teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, but they feared him because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. When evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. In the morning they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. In pre-Islamic Persian mythology, there is a sacred halma tree which bears all seeds. Ahriman is a destructive spirit in Zoroastrianism, and he is responsible for all bad and evil, including death. Ahriman created a frog to invade the tree and destroy it in an attempt to prevent all trees from growing on earth. God created two fish. The two fish were called carfish, which are unidentifiable, though some researchers imagine some type of shark. The fish is always staring at the frog, ready to react to prevent it from destroying the earth. In German paganism and Norse mythology, Yggdrasil is an immense and mythical tree that connects the 9 worlds in Norse cosmology. In the poetic Edda, Odin speaks of 8 serpents gnawing at the root of the tree. The Epic of Gilgamesh talks of the Ulluminati tree. Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love, fertility and warfare, cared for the tree with her hands. She settled the earth around the tree with her foot. She wondered, how long would it be until I have the shining throne to sit upon? How long would it be until I have a shining bed to lie upon? The years passed, 5 years and then 10 years. The tree grew thick, but the bark did not split. Then the serpent, who could not be charmed, made its nest in the roots of the Ulluminati tree. The Anzu bird set its nest in the branches of the tree, and the dark-made Lilith built her home in the trunk. The young woman, who loved to laugh, wept. In some writings, Lilith was Adam's first wife. She is thought to derive, in part, from an historically earlier class of female demons called the Litu in Babylonian religions. After refusing to return to the Garden of Eden, she mated with the archangel Samuel. She is sometimes thought to be the serpent who tricked Eve into eating the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Babylonian texts depict Lilith as a prostitute of the goddess Ishtar. Sumerian accounts that Lilitu is sometimes called the handmaid of Inanna, or the hand of Inanna. The Sumerian text states that Inanna sent a beautiful, unmarried, seductive prostitute out into the fields and the streets to lead men astray. She was said to seduce men, harm pregnant women, mothers and newborn babies, drink blood, and cause disease, sickness and death. The serpent is not the only animal she is associated with. She is also associated with an Anzu bird. An Anzu bird was seen as a massive bird that could breathe fire and water. Anzus are depicted as a lion-headed eagle, like a griffin in reverse. She's also associated with the owl and sometimes depicted with owl claws. In the 2009 movie The Fourth Kind, owls are witnessed by the abductees just before the abduction takes place. The Fourth Kind was based on the mysterious disappearance of 24 people that had taken place in Nome, Alaska between the 1960s and 2004. The owl is used as a symbol for many corporate logos and famously by the secretive Bohemian Club. A 30-foot hollow owl statue made of concrete over steel supports stands at the head of the lake in the grove. The owl shrine was designed by sculptor Haig Patagane. Strange rituals have been witnessed and filmed that have taken place in front of the giant owl at the Bohemian Club. In symbolism, the owl represents the ability to see in the dark and therefore secret and ancient knowledge and wisdom. Birds are common in symbolism. A dove, for example, is considered a sign of peace. Many goddesses were depicted with doves around them. Semiramis was the legendary wife of King Nimrod. King Nimrod was the great-grandson of Noah. She was said to be raised by doves. Armenian traditions portrays her as a spoilt, childish homewrecker that once gathered an army and declared war after being rejected by the Armenian king, Ara the Beautiful. As well as many pagan goddesses, doves often appear alongside the Virgin Mary. They are said to represent the Holy Spirit, though some researchers like Christian minister Alexander Hislop in his 1853 book The Two Babylons claimed that Semiramis invented polytheism in an effort to corrupt her subjects' original faith in the God of Genesis. He also believed that the Catholic Church's depiction of the Blessed Virgin Mary was based on Semiramis. In the Old Testament, a dove brought Noah back an olive leaf. This confirmed to Noah that the water had receded from the earth. The eagle was a symbol of power and strength in ancient Rome, as well as a messenger of the highest gods. The eagle is considered the king of the sky. In the United Kingdom, an eagle is present on the official emblem of the Royal Air Force. Since the 20th of June 1782, the United States used the bald eagle on its Great Seal. The eagle is seen on many coats of arms, corporate logos, flags and seals around the world. The eagle being used to symbolise gods dates back to at least ancient Egypt. The eagle is also connected with Zeus. In Egypt, the symbol of an eagle and the eagle as a form of heraldry date into pre-dynastic Egypt. The book A Bridge to Light, which is believed by some to be given to 32nd degree Freemasons upon completion of the Scottish Rite degrees, provides an explanation to the use of eagle symbolism in ancient Egypt. He writes, "Among the Egyptian, the eagle was the emblem of the wise man because its wings bore him above the clouds into the purer atmosphere and nearer the source of light, and his eyes were not dazzled by that light. Since the eagle also represents the great Egyptian sun god Amun-Ra, it is a symbol of infinite, supreme reason or intelligence." The double-headed eagle is believed to originate from the ancient Near East and was later used in the High Middle Ages from the 10th and 11th centuries, most notably by the Byzantine Empire. The 11th or 12th century representations have also been used in Islamic Spain, France, Bulgaria, and from the 13th century onward it became much more widespread. In modern times, the double-headed eagle is connected to the Scottish Rite and featured on the cover of Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. According to Manly P. Hall, a 33rd degree Freemason, what is being depicted is not actually an eagle, but a double-headed phoenix. Among the ancients, a fabulous bird called the phoenix is described by early writers. In size and shape it resembles the eagle, but with certain differences. The body of the phoenix is covered in glossy purple feathers, and plumes in its tail are alternatively blue and red. The head of the bird is light in colour, and about its neck is a circulate golden plumage. At the back of its back, the phoenix has a crest of feathers of brilliant colour. The phoenix is said to live for 500 years, and at its death the body opens and a newborn phoenix emerges. Because of this, the symbolism of a phoenix is genuinely regarded to be a representation of immortality and resurrection. The phoenix is one sign of the secret orders and the ancient world, and of the initiate of these orders. For it was common to refer to one who had been accepted into these temples as a man twice born or reborn. Wisdom confers a new life, and those who become wise are born again. In the illustrated review of occultism and philosophy, Manly P. Hall also writes on the phoenix. A phoenix is a mythical bird with a colourful plumage and a tail of gold and scarlet, or purple, blue and green, according to some legends. It has a 500-year to 1,000 life cycle, and near the end of its life cycle builds itself a nest of twigs that then ignites both the nest and the birds fiercely, and they are reduced to ashes, from which a new young phoenix or phoenix eggs arises, reborn anew to live again. The new phoenix is destined to live as long as its old self. In some stories, the phoenix embalms the ashes of its old self in an egg made of myrrh and deposits it into the Egyptian city of Heliopolis. William Chernobyl, in his book Satan's Door Revisited, on page 4, writes, "The phoenix of Bunu is believed to be a divine bird going back to ancient Egypt. This phoenix destroys itself in flames and then rises from the ashes. Most occultists believe that the phoenix is a symbol of Lucifer, who was cast down into flames and will one day rise triumphant." What many people around the world believe to be a symbol of peace has a much darker meaning in the ancient world. In 1958, the peace symbol was used by Gerald Holtham as a symbol for the nuclear disarmament movement. From then on, it was popularised in the 1960s by rock bands like the Beatles, and today it is known internationally as a symbol of peace. Throughout the last 2,000 years, the symbol was actually a symbol used to show hatred towards Christians. When the famously psychotic Roman Emperor Nero crucified the Apostle Peter head downward, the event is said to resemble the symbol of the broken cross. From then on, this symbol was used by pagans to show their hate to Christians and Christianity. It became known as the Neronic cross. The broken cross is sometimes called the crow's foot, the Neronic cross, the witch's foot, the sign of the broken Jew. It is seen as a dark symbol, the symbol of the Antichrist. It also signifies the gesture of despair and the death of man. These crosses are all based on the inverted cross, which is probably the most recognisable satanic symbol of them all. The Baphomet is also a very recognisable symbol, which is nearly always connected to Satanism. The word Baphomet, spelled differently, was first mentioned to describe an idol or a deity that the Knights Templar were accused of worshipping, though many researchers and occultists believe the Baphomet to be a representation of the gods of Mendes. The Horned God is a deity found in Wicca, paganism and witchcraft. Wiccans usually believe, worship and base their religion around two gods. The Horned God represents the male, associated with nature, wilderness, sexuality, hunting and the life cycle. The triple goddess is described as the maiden, the mother and the crown, each of which symbolises both a separate stage in the female's life cycle and a phase of the moon. She usually rules one of the realms of the earth, the underworld and the heavens. The skull and crossbones is a symbol consisting of a human skull and two large bones crossed together under the skull. The symbol originates from the late Middle Ages as a symbol of death. Today we see it as a symbol warning of danger, usually in regard to poisonous substances such as chemicals. The symbol was sometimes used on a black background on flags by pirate ships during the early part of the 18th century. In his book Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, Marcus Reddiker explains, the flag was intended to terrify the pirate's prey, but its trade of interlocking symbols, death, violence, limited time, simultaneously pointed to meaningful parts of the seaman's experience and eloquently bespoke the pirates' own consciousness of themselves as they preyed upon in turn. Pirates seized the symbol of mortality from ship captains, who used the skull as a marginal sign in their logos to indicate the record of death. Seamen who became pirates escaped from one closed system only to find themselves encased in another. But as pirates, and only as pirates, these men were able to fight back beneath the sombre colours of King Death against those captains, merchants and officials who waved banners of authority. The skull and crossbones rarely appears on coats of arms and is used by the Skull and Bones secret society, which both George Bush and John Kerry were members of when running against each other in the 2004 presidential election. As well as symbolism, Freemasons and other secret societies are said to use certain hand signs and gestures. Countless celebrities, politicians, rock bands are seen doing the sign of the urn. The signs of the urns is used during religious rituals in Wicca to invoke or represent the urn's god, as well as the Church of Satan. The meaning varies around the world. For example, Hook 'em Horns is a slogan and hand signal of the University of Texas, and one of the earliest usages is thought to be from Gautama Buddha, that used the gesture for the expulsion of demons and the removal of obstacles, sickness and negative thoughts. The hidden hand is used by Freemasons, the Illuminati and other secret societies the world over. They consider themselves the hidden hand of the world. It symbolises the way they see themselves as directing, manipulating and controlling us without the masses noticing. The hidden hand was used widely in the last 2 centuries by people like Joseph Stalin, Jimmy Savile, Napoleon, Mozart and many others have either been photographed or depicted in paintings using the gesture. Freemasons, the Illuminati and other secret societies are thought to be obsessed with symbolism gestures, and many so-called conspiracy theories claim that many, if not all the world's celebrities are actually under a secret oath. Many celebrities and Freemasons symbolise this by covering their lips with their finger. This is said to symbolise the celebrities' powerlessness. They have been sworn to secrecy. Their lips are sealed. Countless celebrities have also posed covering one eye. This is said to represent the one-eyed Dajjal spoken about in the Holy Hadith. The Dajjal is considered by most to be the Islamic version of the Antichrist. According to the Hadith, Muhammad is said to have prophesied that the one-eyed deceiver will be the last in line of a series of 30 deceivers. Muhammad is also reported to have said, Ad-Jazar is blind in one eye, and his eye looks like a bulging grape. Zechariah verse 11 chapter 16 tells us, The Lord said to me, Take again yourself for the equipment of a foolish shepherd. For behold, I am going to raise up a shepherd in the land who will not care for the perishing, seek the scattered, heal the broken, or sustain the one standing, but will devour the flesh of the fat sheep and tear off their hooves. To the worthless shepherd who leaves his flock, a sword will be in his arm and his right eye. His arm will be totally withered and his right eye will be blind.